Indian Paint is a 1965 Western without any cowboys. Set in a pre-Manifest Destiny America, this family film tells the story of a boy, the horse he loves, and how that love turned him into a man. Directed by Norman Foster, Indian Paint stars Johnny Crawford, Jay Silverheels, and Pat Morgan. Somewhere in the pre-United States, Nishko is a member of the Arikara tribe, the chief's son, and most of all, a 12-year-old boy awaiting the birth of a pony that will grow to be his own. But the horse and the boy have a lot of growing up to do, and many dangers and trials to face, dangers of nature and of men. Can the boy find the strength to protect his horse and his village, to become the man he needs to be? And when the time comes, will he be able to let go? The novel Indian Paint, published in 1942, was written by Glenn Balk, who wrote many other horse stories for school-age readers. Producer Bob Callahan had previously tried to turn the book into a film before it became a star vehicle for Johnny Crawford. Johnny Crawford was a co-star on the hit TV western The Rifleman, which lasted 5 years, turning Crawford into not just a TV star, but a recording star as well. When The Rifleman ended in 1963, Crawford had a chance to pursue a movie career. With Crawford bringing his youth and western bona fides to the big screen, this movie sounded like a safe box office bet. So what's wrong with it? First off, this movie is not historically accurate. The opening narration says this happens long before European colonization began, even though Europeans introduced the horse to America. Also, there's brownface, which was pretty much the norm for Western films and TV at the time, but it's even more glaring in a movie that's supposed to be all Native American characters. As a cultural artifact, it's the wrong message. The film name-checks Arikaras and Comanches, but it's not really presenting the lives of any single tribal culture, so much as adding backstory to Hollywood Injuns, fictional characters that were barely more than nameless props in decades of popular culture. At its core, Indian Paint is still the story of a boy and his beloved horse, but the friendship between the boy and his horse sometimes feels one-sided, like the horse is just an objective. Crawford tries to make the chief's son likable, but sometimes that kid makes unjustifiably selfish choices, adding even more mixed messages to this movie. And even though this film was tailored for a young audience, it's still an indigenous exploitation film, with war dances, scalping games, tomahawk battles, arrow kills, a manhood ceremony involving tenterhooks starting around minute 70. For those who came for the animals, there's plenty of scenes with horses roaming free, and quite a few other animals to see as well. Wolves, bison, a mountain lion all get worked into the script. Animal lovers be warned, though, at least 2 horses meet a tragic fate, but just in the story. Visually, it's at least as well made as the TV westerns and Disney live-action movies of the time. Director Norman Foster was in his wheelhouse here. He had directed several projects for Disney, featuring Davy Crockett and Zorro, 2 of their most popular Western heroes. The cinematographer was Floyd Crosby, who had also lensed High Noon. Crosby really makes the most of the Western landscape. And for those Western fans that were interested in an all-Injun movie, Indian Paint does give Native American characters the focus that they rarely received in Hollywood pictures, making them more relatable to audiences of the time than they usually had a chance to be. Jay Silverheels would know. His role as Nishko's dad allowed him to exhibit a lot more emotional range than his signature role as Tonto, the Lone Ranger's sidekick. Indian Paint has been lost to time, for good reason. It was trying to present a culture to their intended audience with what they presumed was honor, but without enough involvement of the people it was trying to represent. The result is well-intentioned racism. This movie presents the positive stereotypes, but they're still stereotypes that limit how their equivalents in the real world are actually seen. So this movie wasn't exactly embraced by the Native American community at its release. And Indian Paint was behind the times in a lot of other ways when it finally hit theaters in 1965. By then, Clint Eastwood and Sergio Leone were reinvigorating the Western by questioning the mythologies that the genre had presented for so long. Native American characters would eventually evolve as well, and more Native American actors and filmmakers would have the chance to add their voices to the cultural conversation. Johnny Crawford appeared in another movie in 1965, Village of the Giants. He also enlisted that year, serving 2 years in the U.S. Army. He would return to Hollywood, appearing in sporadic roles throughout the next few decades, about as rarely as the Hollywood westerns themselves. In the 90s, he returned to music, this time as the bandleader of the Johnny Crawford Orchestra. So, how do you watch this movie? First, if you can't get past the racial inaccuracies, don't bother. It's not a good enough story to distract you from that. But say that you can get past it. In fact, all this may be politically correct oversensitivity to you. Indian Paint was intended for the TV Western fans of its time, and in its technical aspects, it's solid, featuring Tonto and the Rifleman's son in the lead roles. It's a mix of novelty and nostalgia that just might satisfy you. Just remember that these are very fictional characters. If you are going to show this movie to kids, the least you can do is expose them to the actual history of the tribes that inspired them.